Alright, so here are a few examples about currency conversions. So as of today, the conversion rate is 1 Canadian dollar is equivalent to 0.7908 US dollars. So if I were to travel to the United States and I were to take 500 Canadian dollars with me, I would have to convert that over to US dollars in order to spend it. Now, I would need to find out how much money I would actually end up be going with in United States dollars. So to do this, what I will do is use proportions and cross multiplication to find out what the missing value is. So from my conversion factor here, $1, 1 Canadian is equal to 0.7908 US, I can make a fraction. So I can write that as 1 over 0.7908. Take note here that I've got Canadian on top and US on bottom. Now to fill out my other fraction, I'm also going to stick with Canadian being on top and US being on bottom. So what numbers am I given? I'm given 500 Canadian. So the 500 goes on this side, and since it's a Canadian value, it needs to go up here where I was putting the Canadian values. So if I put the Canadian number on top here, I need to put the Canadian number on top here. And likewise, US numbers on bottom here, so it needs to go on bottom here. Of course, I don't know how much this is in US, so I will just write X in, and we will go ahead and solve for X now. I'm going to remove these C's and U's now, so I can tidy it up a little bit. Now I need to solve for this value here. Using cross multiplication, if you have trouble with cross multiplication, we want to double check the previous video. In this case, I would multiply these two numbers here and divide by 1. So I would go with 0.7908 times 500 and divide the result by 1. When I go ahead and do that, I end up with 395.40. So that tells me then that $500 Canadian today are equivalent to a little bit over $395. So that's how I can take Canadian and convert it to US dollars. So let's do the reverse process now. What if I started with US dollars but wanted to convert it to Canadian? Let's say we've got, I don't know, 150 US dollars. And I want to find out how much that is in Canadian dollars. So again, using my conversion factor that I started with up here, I'm going to make the same fraction. I'll stick with Canadian on top, although it doesn't matter. But that would give me 1 over 0.7908. So I've got Canadian on top here, so over here on this fraction, my Canadian needs to go on top again. So right here, I don't know what my Canadian is, so I'm going to put my X right there. My US number is on bottom here, so over here, my US number needs to go on bottom again. So my 150 is down there. And now I cross multiply. So to solve for X, I would do 1 times 150, and then take the result and divide it by 0.7908. And doing that gives me approximately 227.62 Canadian. So note that we can use the same conversion rate to go both directions, whether we're solving for Canadian or US dollars. So let's use I don't know, a different currency rate besides American dollar for now. Let's try using Indian rupees. So the conversion rate today is 1 Canadian is approximately equal to 59.137 rupees. So let's say I were to take 40 Canadian dollars. Let's convert that over to rupees. So I'm going to take my conversion rate. I'm going to write a fraction from it. So I could put my Canadian on top again. So let's write this as 1 over 59.137. So I've got Canadian on top, rupees on bottom. So in the other fraction, my Canadian needs to go on top again, which is my $40. So my Canadian on top and my rupees on bottom. I'm finding out what that is. So actually we'll put X right there. And now cross multiply to find out what X is. I would have to multiply 59.137 by 40. So 59.137 times 40. And then divide it by 1. And that gives me a result of about 2,365.48 rupees. And just like the last one, let's go the reverse direction. So let's say if I was taking the rupees that I had left over from my trip and converting them back into Canadian dollars. Let's say I had 200 rupees left, and I'm converting it back to Canadian. So make a fraction out of the conversion factor again. So I would still write it as 1 over 59.137. Got my Canadian dollars on top. So when I'm going to make the other fraction over here, my Canadian still needs to go on top. So my X is up here, and my rupees go down on the bottom. So now to find out what the missing value is, I would cross multiply. So I'm going to have to multiply these two numbers together. So 1 times 200. And then divide by the number that's left over, which in this case is the 59.137. And then that gives me approximately 3.38 Canadian dollars.